Usually whenever a design document is written, it lays out a clear path forward. It removes all doubt, it removes questions, and it answers everything good enough so that people generally have an idea of what's going on or how things are going to work. It also tends to leave players excited for the features or looking forward to something. This design document, in true SIG fashion, does none of that. It doesn't really answer very many questions. I would argue that if you're a critical thinker, it leaves you asking more questions than you were before. So I'm going to jump into this, and I'm only going to talk about the things that are important, to me anyway, or things that I think are important to the game, and I'm going to ignore the fluff. The first thing I want to discuss is the engineer role that they have on here. And all of these are going to be on the screen. I'm not going to read them off to you so the video doesn't get too long. The engineer role is probably the biggest meme in Star Citizen right now. And before this, the big meme in Star Citizen was that armor will fix it. And as we will get to, armor didn't actually fix anything. But in order to be an engineer in Star Citizen, you are going to be staring at a panel. While the pilot is flying and seeing space, the gunners are firing and also seeing space, or people are doing a myriad of other more interesting things, you will be down somewhere staring at a panel. Now, I am sure, without doubt, that there are a lot of retarded Redditors out there that think this sounds great. These are also the same people that will post pictures of themselves picking up trash around stations and throwing it into bins, essentially bragging about being Jannies and not getting paid for it. Those are the sorts of people that I think are going to enjoy this type of gameplay. They are not very smart to begin with, and they are incapable of understanding the bigger picture. I have always been critical of the idea behind the engineering role. I don't think it's a good idea, to be completely honest with you. The idea that a single player is going to sit there and stare at a screen while everybody else does everything else has never seemed like something particularly fun to me. That is not to say that I do not think there should be an engineer role, but typically when I think of engineering, at least in most games, I am thinking about something far more interactive than just staring at a screen. Which, again, is all the engineer here is going to do. They are going to play a minigame, and I called this years ago when I first showed this crap at one of those shitcons. It seemed like the most boring role anybody could ever have on a ship in a game. Even more so than turret gunning, and we all know how bad that is. But there's one line here that really sticks out to me, and I want to really elaborate on this line, and I'm going to read it out to you. Quote, "Having clear communication between your captain, pilot, and engineers is a must." That line right there tells me a lot. That tells me that this entire system has been designed by people or a person who does not play this game or who does not understand how games work in the first place. This is a role-playing document. This is not an engineer design document. This is a role-playing document. This is a document written by somebody who loves all the sci-fi movie tropes and wants as many of those tropes in the game. What captain? Who's the captain of the ship? Let's assume the captain is a person who owns the ship. The person who has spent $2,700 on a Javelin. Do you mean to tell me that this guy is not going to pilot it? There is no captain. There is the pilot. But if you're a SIG employee and you're in the business of designing an art project that is masquerading as an MMO, where you can LARP out all of your favorite Star Trek/Star Wars fantasies, this sounds like a great idea. This sounds like a plausible reality. But if you are with me on planet Earth in the current year, you will understand that that is not how this game works, nor any other game. Not even crap like Sea of Thieves or Marauders, that failed game. They don't work like that. There is no captain role. It is that disconnect that I see here in that one single line that tells me more about this document than anything else. It is not written for gameplay purposes. This is role-playing bullshit that people who want to win will not bother doing, and it simply will not exist. I want to move on to the subsystems now. They describe a whole bunch of stuff. None of it matters. It's whatever. It's all fluff. But to further emphasize the disconnect that SIG has with reality of the game and fantasy, I want to hone in on life support. What is the purpose of life support in this game, now or in the future? We are always in spacesuits. Do these people here designing this game actually envision you, the player, us, the players, walking around our ships in the game in civilian clothing and then running to a locker to put a suit on during combat or to leave the ship? Are they that lost in the Second Life sauce that they think that this is how people play the game? Of course not. You are always in a spacesuit. There is no reason not to be in a spacesuit. If you have life support off or low, you just have oxypens? It doesn't make sense. Think about this, and think about this very critically. They are putting stuff down that sounds good in their heads, that does not sound good in reality, or is in any way, shape, or form representative of the reality of the game as it is now. I have yet for anybody, SIG or otherwise, to explain to me why I should care about life support in a game where I am always wearing a suit that gives me life support. The next part of the document that I really wanted to hone in on is the mind-boggling fuse system. I have, much like most of engineering, I have been critical of the fuse system since the inception of this god-awful idea. Somebody there thought that this was necessary, that we had to have another thing for players to contend with, because we're going to already have systems that fail, we're going to have fires that spread, but we also have to have the fuse system. What positive does the fuse system add to the game? It seems to be, in their mind anyway, that it's another way to add damage control to the game. In a game that's already adding damage control, the fuses do not add anything positive to this game. They do not add a fun feature, and they do not solve a problem that exists which requires solving. You could scrap the entire fuse idea, and the engineering gameplay and the multi-crew gameplay, what little of it there is, would actually get just a little bit better. Let's also look at how redundant and stupid this system is. So, fuses will break. So everybody on the ship is going to have a backpack full of fuses? If everybody's got a backpack full of fuses, then what's the point of the fuse system? Just to make the player do something? To micromanage something? Is that fun now? Is micromanaging now something fun that we do in games? Usually that's kind of a bad thing unless you're playing an RTS. So if the players have a ton of fuses in their backpack, which they're going to need, the system seems ultimately pointless because we're bypassing it. Or are we going to put in a gamified restriction on how many fuses you can buy or how many you can carry, or maybe you just won't be able to buy them in the store? So what are people going to do? They're going to pull up another ship and yank the fuses out and put them in their backpack anyway? There are a myriad of things that players are going to do to gamify and circumvent this stupid system. Have any of you ever tried to do contested zones, right? You can do the contested zones, and some of those things you have to open up with a fuse. They were impossible to get to work. You would lose them, they'd fall out of your hands, they just sometimes do not work. These bad design decisions, like fuses, they do not make the game more sophisticated. The next one I want to talk about here is armor penetration in the armor system. Do you guys remember when I would make these videos talking about how garbage these ships are, big ones, and how worthless they are? People go, oh, you just gotta wait for armor to fix it. Armor didn't fix shit. I wish armor would have been this Jesus Christ tech that came down from the heavens and smacked all the gay light fighters away and made the game better. Alas, it is not, and reality is here again, and the reality is that armor is simply another health bar, except a bit more obtuse and abstract. When I had envisioned the armor system, I was thinking something more along the lines of Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 damage reduction and damage threshold. It's a very basic system. Certain types of ammo could meet a damage threshold, and once it defeated the threshold, the damage reduction would reduce it by a certain amount. I would encourage you to look up the Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 DRDT system if you want to learn more about it. It's actually pretty good, and I think it's something that would have been a lot better than what we have currently in Star Citizen. But the kicker here now is that since things can penetrate armor, and then they hit your components, and that is one of the primary ways that ships are destroyed right now. The goal of this was to extend the TTK. The TTK is not really being extended right now in testing, which is probably subject to change. The TTK is just as fast, if not faster, and that's ignoring all the bugs. The issue here is that the power plant going critical results in the death of a ship. It is very easy to hit power plants on ships, or any components for that matter. Now, I want you to think here. Let's do this together. Think about this. Envision this. Think about your favorite ship, or any of the big ships. How loose are those components? Meaning, how spread out are they? Are they spread out throughout the ship for redundancy? Or are they all in one area? If you said one area, you are correct. So, as damage is coming in, and shots are penetrating the ship, you are hitting multiple components at once. And if you're hitting the power plants, just one of them, you're going to cause it to go critical. And when it goes critical, the ship goes boom. You can think about this like War Thunder tanks. You shoot the ammo rack, the tank explodes. Same thing here, except instead of the ammo rack, you're hitting the power plant. As armor is being penetrated and things are hitting the power plant, I would argue that ships are just simply going to die faster now, and they are currently in testing, dying faster now than ever before. What's interesting about this is if you remember the old multi-crew test they did a couple years back with the A2 and the Gladius, they ended up shutting it down. And they ended up shutting it down because the testing was pointless because, in their own words, the ships died before any of the penetration or component damage mattered. That is still the case multiple years later. The ships just die before any meaningful repairs or anything else could be done. I feel like they were trying to emulate a Sea of Thieves type system, but in typical SIG fashion, they made it overcomplicated because they confuse complication with sophistication, and they think that anything that is simple and elegant is inferior and poorly designed. The reason why multi-crew gameplay works in Sea of Thieves, and a couple games like it, is because it is not overcomplicated. And the ships in those games are not mazes that are hard to navigate or find the sources of damage and things to repair and fix and whatever. But in Star Citizen, can you imagine you're in a fight and you're trying to run around, say, a Hammerhead or even an Idris and repair things? You may be running for hundreds of meters up numerous staircases or elevators or ladders just to get to something to repair it. Something that will probably be destroyed and critical by the time you get there. So what is the solution going to be? Do we just put players by every single component with a repair gun out, getting ready to fix it? Is that what is expected to happen? Of course not. What's expected to happen, in the eyes of SIG and their infinite wisdom, is that players will be living amongst their ship and click, doing doodads or whatever they're doing on their engineering terminal, or sitting in their turrets and shooting, and the non-existent captain's going to shout over the radio, "We need repairs on the shield generator in sector sub 789, over." And the engineer is going to say some stupid Star Trek movie quote, and then he's going to run down there and he's going to find it and repair it. That's what they think is going to happen. Anybody who plays the game, again, knows this is not what's going to happen. The next thing that everybody hates here is the wear system. And the wear system, I could take it or leave it. But that is the biggest complaint I'm seeing. And the wear system is being complained about because it is indicative of player mindset these days. People do not like to lose things. People are not going to use things that they know are going to go away. People have changed now. And the reason why I say I can give or take the wear system is I am used to things like that in games, and I have played games with those types of systems. But the one thing I have observed in games where those type of systems exist, more often than not, players will opt to use the most common and good enough, easily replaceable, we'll just say component available. And you can see this actually happening in Star Citizen if this wear system was to go in place. What is my motivation to go and get a component out of a CZ? And CZs are garbage content anyway, but to go to a CZ and get a component and deal with all that stupid shit, knowing that that component will eventually break anyway, just to get me to go back and interact with systems I don't want to interact with, such as the CZs. What is my motivation to use any of these high-tier components when I could just go to a store and buy a good enough component to use that? It is a psychological impact. So either you make these components that you get somewhere, like CZs or whatever, so good that you would want to use them, but even if you did do that, people are likely not to use them. This is a problem that developers seem to never really fully understand. All the way back in Ultima Online, again, there was really no wear tear system back then, but the core concept was the same, is you can lose things, you don't use them. So people just used what was good enough. Instead of seeing people rolling out in full magic plate with two-handed claymores that were enchanted, people rolled out and did PvP with robes and, iron swords. They weren't using the best stuff. This happened in Darkfall. This happened in Mortal Online 1 and 2. This happened in every single game I played. This wear system is being done to promote the non-existent player economy. And I keep hearing about this player economy. So is wear necessary for a player economy? You would think so. You can't have things exist permanently and be there forever, or else there's no scarcity. They can't be replaced. So then what's going to determine the scarcity here? Am I going to be able to claim the item back on insurance? Does that mean I'm going to insurance fraud every item? If I claim the item back on insurance, do I get it brand new and fresh, or do I get one with the same wear and durability as my old one? What is my incentive to use these very rare items? Because as I use them, they actively are degrading. They're actively, in the mind of a player, taking damage and getting worse over time. Will this encourage me not to use my favorite ship and my favorite components? Will I instead be encouraged to use other bullshit ships that I don't care about instead of the one I really want to use because that one is more efficient? That also doesn't sound very fun. Again, I'm not sold on the wear system. I'm also not sold on the player economy. And since the normally brain-dead Star Citizen community is actually unified and in arms about this stupid change, it's probably that big of a deal and that much of a problem that should probably be reevaluated. And finally, I want to talk about the fire system. It's the last thing on this document, and I'm going to wrap it up with my conclusion. The purpose of fires, we have the damage control loop. So the idea here is to, again, much like fuses, add a system that players have to worry about in order to bring the non-existent power of multi-crew ships in line. One of the things I want to focus on is what they say right here. Fires can start due to overheating, malfunctions, or direct damage. Engineers must respond quickly using fire extinguishers or by venting a room to remove oxygen and suppress the flames. They then go on to talk about how the fire extinguishers will have a limited charge. You gotta redock them or whatever, recharge them. Much like fuses, what is to stop me from carrying multiple fire extinguishers in my backpack if I wanted to use them? And the second thing is, remember how we said that we were all in spacesuits? What is to stop me from not just flying around with all of the doors open and life support off so that fire becomes a non-factor? If those two things work, carrying extra extinguishers and venting everything, what is the point? Because we're now circumventing it. Do you know why this is in here, really? I'll tell you why. It's because somebody there watched The Expanse, and the most dreaded question that any game developer with no experience can ask was asked. That question is this: wouldn't it be cool if? That is the most dangerous question in game development. The rule of cool doesn't always work. We have a system that can be easily defeated and trivialized by things in the game already, such as opening all the doors and venting everything out and having multiple fire extinguishers on your pack. Same for the fuses. I'm going to keep going back to that by having a ton of fuses in your backpack. If the systems can be trivialized in such a way, what is their point? This whole thing actually just sounds like a worse version of food and drink in terms of necessity and fun, but for ships. It's food and drink for ships. There isn't a single thing in this design document that looks good. There isn't a single thing here that makes me want to use multi-crew ships. And while we're on that topic, to kind of wrap up this insane rant, where's the manpower going to come for all of this multi-crew stuff? In a game where everybody wants to be their own pilot, where everybody owns these ships, where there is a psychological backing with money, a psychological financial backing for players to fly their own ship that they purchased. Are we as big ship owners going to bully people who have starter ships into being our subservient multi-crew? Are we who own big ships going to beg other big ship owners to not fly their big ships to multi-crew our ship and put out fires and change fuses? Where is the manpower coming from in a game where everybody wants to be the main hero? And I'm not even going to talk about turrets because that's its own separate topic. But there isn't a single thing here that makes me want to load a ship up with a bunch of people and put up with all of this shit. I would rather just fly my own ship that's big enough that could do most of everything and skip all this garbage. And I think that's what most people are going to do unless something changes. This whole design document, it's crap.